You're invited to join Abundant by Nature, a summer activation to rewire your programming, elevate your abundance frequency, and receive from your true nature of abundance and overflow. This is going to be a fun, easy, and very accessible 3-month group program with me guiding you live, also giving you coaching rooted in transformational neurolinguistic programming so you can clear the unconscious blocks to receiving, to your worthiness, to anything you want in life. Heal any wounds around money, any deep programming around the guilt and shame when it comes to being spiritual and being of service, and also receiving. This program has been coming through me for a few years now, and I'm so excited to finally bring this to you. As I said, it's going to be fun. We're going to do a lot of really just exciting, easy practices that you can integrate into your life forever. Embodiment practices, voice work, and also working with plant spirits and plant medicines, including in ceremony and ritual. Don't worry, there are no psychedelics required. But I really encourage you to take a look here at the webpage and sign up. The doors are open now. We start in June. And as I said, this is a live program guided by me inside of a community container. I made it really accessible, and I'm going to make it lots of fun for all of us. So I hope to see you there. The psychedelic revolution is here. If you want to integrate your visionary experiences into your purpose, get clear on your entrepreneurial path, and help people while you do what you love, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach, 3-time entrepreneur, and a lifelong student of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. You carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times. This podcast will help you to share your medicine so you can create transformation in the world. Listen in on conversations with psychedelic leaders, changemakers, and conscious entrepreneurs who are living proof that a better world is possible when you follow your heart and live in alignment with your soul. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am so excited. I have my former client and friend here with us, Sara Price. Hi, Sara. Thank you for being here.
Hey, so excited to be here, finally.
I know, finally. I've been asking ever since the day I met her. I was like, you have to come on my podcast. So I just want to start by saying we're going to go into a lot of different topics. But one thing that I have to say I'm very impressed by with Sara is her knowledge of Kambo. I do know this about you. I know a lot about you, but I know you created this advanced practitioner training for Tribal Detox Kambo, the Kambo school. And, for those of us, by the way, this is also known as Kambo. I've never confirmed the right way to say it, but I say it as Kambo. It's the American thing. But for anyone that wants to know about Kambo, listen in, because I'm telling you, I have not met many people out there that really know and understand the science of what's really happening and all of this work around peptides. But before that, Sara, tell me a little bit about your journey. You came to my mastermind program. You were in there last year, and you were already like a health and wellness coach, and doing the Kambo work. But tell everybody, how'd you get to this path of your entrepreneurship, what you're doing in the world?
Yeah, totally. I'd love to sort of jump into it. So, my background, I'm a registered nurse. I am a board certified nurse coach, and which is kind of wellness coaching, but from like a nursing perspective. But I actually started off as a neonatal ICU nurse. I spent the first 13 years or so, I guess I should really say 13 years of my career working in the neonatal ICU with the really tiny sick babies. And I used to always joke around that if you're over 20 pounds, I kind of don't know what to do with you, but that was not quite true. For me, like during that time, it was really fulfilling and I loved work, but I lived through the mantra of, oh, I'll sleep when I die. I would work night shifts and then flip back to day shifts and just really kind of abused this body that I had and sort of pushed sleep off to the side. And interestingly, during that time, I started getting diagnosed with autoimmune conditions. I had my first one and I was like, okay, you just take a pill. It's for the thyroid. And I just was like, all right. And it wasn't alarming to me at the time. I was just like, oh, okay. From this Western perspective, it was, oh yeah, this just happens. So as I started working and continuing not to sleep, continuing not to support my body and ignoring all the signs it was showing me that things were going really wrong, I started collecting more autoimmune conditions. Through that time, I just started feeling worse and worse. I was forever exhausted. I just could never feel good. And I kept making excuses for it until it kind of came to a breaking point. I had just moved to New York. It was a really stressful move. It was a really stressful work situation. And I get there, I get on my team of doctors because at this point I have a team of doctors, um, multiple. And I'm like, all right. And I just gotten diagnosed with, I think it was like the fourth diagnosis that I had. And I went into my doctor and I was like, all right, I'm in my early 30s. I know what happens when you have multiple autoimmune conditions. How do I make this stop? Because what ends up happening is the immune system gets a little funky and you just start getting more and more. The more you have, the more likely you are to then get more and the dysfunction to just sort of spiral. So when I went in and I asked that question of like, okay, I'm too young for this. This has got to stop. I was met with like this answer of like, well, don't stop working out. And I was so defeated in that moment, so defeated. I was just like, this can't be my life. Um, and around this time, I had the great fortune of, I kind of started going into sales. And from there, I ended up in sales for a company that was more into an alternative healthcare product. And the more I started floating around and using the product itself, which was a fasting mimicking product, and seeing its benefits, I was like, oh, wait, this is the shift from like the Western mindset of like a pill for an ill to like, wait, maybe the body can heal itself. And that opened up the most incredible door for me. So through that, I started working and reading a lot of different things and viewing my own health differently and my own body a bit differently. And I had the cool opportunity to meet all these healthcare providers who were doing things differently because the people who adopt those kind of new modalities are usually in their alternative space. And they all wanted to sort of share their medicine with you. So I started just, for anybody who knows me, I'm going to rabbit hole into everything. So I'd learn a little bit about this. I learn a little bit about this. And I just kept rabbit holing going down. And I also try everything. I'll try anything. And so I started learning about all these different modalities and slowly, like step by step, I was starting to get better. Step by step, I would start to like feel better. And a lot of my journey has actually been around fatigue. And so I've been always fighting, trying to figure out, well, why am I so tired? Why am I so tired? And every step would get me a little bit step closer, but I could never quite get to it. And the beauty in that, in the journey to actually feeling alive and well and full of energy, was that I got to learn about a lot of the contributing factors to fatigue. And even though something didn't work for me, I got to learn maybe who it would be right for and when is the right situation to sort of implement something like this. And I feel like I was able to pick up a ton of nuggets in this journey to where I am now so that when I start to work with somebody, I'm not just coming from my own experience. It's like, well, what all have I dug into and what am I going to learn through this next experience and dig into with somebody? So it's really this cool process of my own journey to going from feeling like I can't get out of bed to feeling full of life and alive and just wanting so deeply for every single person to feel this way. So, and then here we are. And
So good.
along this way was Kambo.
Yeah. And then, yeah. So I know it's so funny. I met you, gosh, what, like a year, maybe 9 months before you joined the mastermind program. And, I've done Kambo enough times and kind of always, it's not my favorite medicine, but I do appreciate it so much. I do. It's just like, whoa, very uncomfortable. But yeah, how did you discover Kambo?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I have been interested in peptides for a long time. I have used injectable peptides prior to learning about Kambo. And so I already had a powerful belief or a powerful understanding of them and a deep experience myself of understanding how they could help with the body, teaching the body, not teaching, but guiding the body to begin healing, right? So I came to it with that foundation. I was actually at an ayahuasca retreat, and one of the girls looks at me. She was starting a med spa, and she was like, "Oh, you like peptides? You should totally look at Kambo. You know, it's full of peptides." And I was like, "What? You mean a frog secretion has peptides?" Well, little did I know that like most of the research on peptides is done on frog secretions. But I was like, "Oh well, I've got to check this out." So I got back to the States, and the first time I just was like, "Let me Google, let me look around, let me try this," because I totally will just try I will try a lot of things. Just I love experiences. And so I was like, "Let me check this out." So I did it the first time. And I had the great fortune of sitting with a tribal detox trained practitioner. Um, and on the side of her table, I saw a book, a Dr. William Seed's peptide book. And I was like, "Oh, you like take this seriously." And so my first experience was interesting, right? Your body goes through this really wild roller coaster of physical experience. And I felt okay afterwards. But then a few months later, one of my conditions is celiac. And I ended up exposed to gluten twice in a week. And I was so sick. I cannot explain, especially for me, it ends up becoming like a GI piece, but then it becomes an entire existence piece where I hurt all over. I am beyond exhausted. I have severe brain fog. And this was 2 months later. I just was spiraling out of control. And I couldn't quite figure out how to bring myself back together. And I remember sitting there one day, I was like, I should try that combo thing. So I reached back out and ended up having to sit with another practitioner. But I did 3 days in a row, and I went from barely able to function to bouncing off the walls. And I was just like, oh my God, I feel so good. Everybody should feel this good. I've got to learn more about this. And not long after that, I was headed to Creede, Colorado to learn from Jason Fellows at Tribal Detox.
My God.
It was so powerful, so powerful.
So yeah, let's talk about this. And then we'll get into all of your work because I'm curious how fatigue could be helped with combo or because that was my experience too, is like when I was at a really just like a low point physically, energetically, tired, like couldn't function. And honestly, there were a few of us that got sick on coming home from a dieta in Peru. And it was just like there was this feeling of like, I need to hit a reset button. And someone was like, you should really do combo for that. And it was amazing. And I did the 3 sessions in a moon cycle, but it just kind of healed it instantly. And I hate to say that, right? But there's a lot of people, especially where I live in Lyme country, there's a lot of people that do swear by it. But like from a scientific standpoint, or at least the science that like what do we know about combo? Like, how does it even work? Like you just said, there's peptide research using frogs. I had no idea. Wow.
Right. Yeah, combo's really interesting. And we have to remember that it is a really complex secretion. So whenever I'm injecting myself or working with peptides, whether it's a pill or an injection, it is a single peptide that has a host of benefits to the body, and it influences their peptide receptors all over the place, right? So let me actually step back a little bit. What is a peptide? A
Yeah, right.
peptide. So a peptide is a short chain of amino acids. So long chains make up proteins, and then short chains make up peptides. And how many amino acids? So that would be like glycine and lysine and cysteine and all these ene words you might have heard of. They're all amino acids. They are all linked. They link up together, and however they do that creates a peptide or protein if it's long. And so we have around, I think the number last I heard was like, I think they think there's like 6,000 different peptides that our body makes and has receptors for. And, to sort of put this into perspective, I always like to use oxytocin as an example, right? So we know of oxytocin as like the snuggle hormone, the love hormone, right? It creates an emotional experience of openness and community and love. But that exact same hormone is actually what causes contraction of the uterus during labor. It's the same hormone that causes milk letdown when a mom is going to feed her baby. So we can have peptides that have effects on both the neurologic system and the emotional experience, as well as the physical body. So now imagine Kambo, which has 27 different bioactive peptides in it.
And that's
So
like proven or
yeah. Oh yeah, they've actually they've brought back samples. It was originally looked under a microscope in the 80s by Dr. Vittorio Erspemer, who looked at it under a microscope and and he actually has done a ton of research on peptides in general. I have a picture of him with like pictures of frogs in the background. He clearly loved the frogs. And when he originally looked at it, he was like, this is, I think the quote that has been attributed to him is like, this is like a fantastical cocktail with incredible like human potential, because there are so many bioactive peptides. And even more recently, there have been papers published where they brought back samples from the jungle, looked at it under microscope, and there's an analysis where they kind of compare the what it looks like to known, and they're like, yep, looks like this, and this looks like this, and this is this. So 27 of them. So imagine combining 27 compound molecules that have all different effects, right? Each of them has a multitude of effects. So when we start looking at what it is and how powerful it is, it's a complex cocktail, essentially. So it has an enormous number of effects. And I think I might have answered your question in there.
right. Yeah. So then, okay. So I interrupted you about the 27. What were you saying that we were, yeah. So the 27 has been shown to be like in our bodies or something that
we have receptors for.
Receptors.
So they either look almost exactly like things that our body is already making. And when we think about these kind of molecules, it's like if it looks alike, it behaves alike. Right. And so if it looks alike, it'll fit the key into the lock and then activate a whole slew of changes. So essentially what peptides are signaling molecules. So it signals the body. It doesn't, a lot of times medications will stop something or block something or add something. And what peptides do is they kind of almost turn the key on the body's ability to operate the way it's supposed to, right? To be in balance, to do the things it's supposed to do. For example, speaking of just a different peptide, that would be like BPC, that's an injectable peptide, right? It tells its soft tissue to heal itself. And it directs all the things that are supposed to be used to heal to do so. And so that's essentially what peptides do, is they signal. There can be neuropeptides that are signaling and creating signaling within the central nervous system in the brain. And then there are hormone-like peptides as well and they can also operate as both. So they are essentially signalers.
Okay. That's why it feels so okay. Because, I have to say, and I'm sure anybody listening who has worked with Kambo, I always feel good afterwards. I mean, I've never, minus sometimes the little puffy frog face, sometimes, not always. I always feel like $1 million, it's like, I feel like a reset switch was turned on. I feel energy come back. That's actually one of the most noticeable things I've experienced. And I've always wondered about it. I'm like, how is this working? Is it adding something? Is it doing something? And then there's that purge, the bile purge thing, which I've also never quite understood why it has to be like that. I mean, I guess there's different theories, right? I know there's also people out there practicing kind of slightly different techniques and ways of using it. But yeah, how do you explain the purge? Or is that just like to flush things out with the water and the
Yeah, totally. So I do want to speak to something actually that you just said as well. Just before getting into the purge, Jason has a great way of saying this. And, as I've done an enormous amount of digging into the peptides of Kambo, I truly believe that this is an accurate way of saying it, is that the energy that you feel, the way you feel afterwards is really, these peptides almost just are that reset button for the body to operate the way it's supposed to. That feeling like $1 million is just how we're supposed to feel. And so it's, this resetting of the nervous system, right? Resetting of the immune system, this just sort of like flipping the switch of like, a good way to sort of maybe compare it to is people will do things like sauna use or cold plunge, right? There's this like a little bit of a shock to the system that hits that reset button so that things can then start working the way that they're supposed to. And I see it very similarly, that all these peptides are sort of like you like come back, and that's pretty much what is happening. Now, when it comes to the purge is really interesting. There's definitely a belief out there that a purge is a detoxification. And that's one thing that I think is incredibly misunderstood. And it's one of the misunderstandings that probably leads to the greatest potential harm that can come from Kambo, which is where we believe a purge has to happen because we're believing that toxins are being released. So if you come from the mindset that toxins are being released and it's in the purge, then the mindset that you have to get it out kind of, I guess, could make sense, right? But that foundational premise is actually just a misunderstanding. So in order for toxins to be released, right, we store toxins pretty much in our fatty tissue. So that's our visceral fat, heavy metals that are getting stored in our brain, right? So these have to first be mobilized. They have to be released from where they are stored. And then in order for them to get into the purge, which is coming from bile, it has to get through the liver, into the gallbladder, out of the gallbladder, into the stomach, and now out into your bucket. Most people are purging at around like 5 to 7 minutes if they're going to purge. That does not happen that quickly. So what's in your bile is essentially what has been collecting in the gallbladder since your last fatty meal. And the mobilization hasn't happened. There's also not really a mechanism when we look at the peptides. There's not a mechanism for mobilizing, right? When we do any sort of detox, it's mobilization and kind of binding, essentially conjugation, and then excretion. And we're just missing the mobilization piece. And maybe there will be information that comes out in the future about, a new understanding of how a peptide works, but in our current understanding, that's just not what we're seeing. So when it comes to the purge is simply, I'm going to say it's a bug, not a feature, right? So one of the things, actually, there's multiple things happening, but some of the peptides in Kambo are actually causing a lot of stimulation to the GI tract. One of those is actually a stimulation of the gallbladder and the pancreas and the stomach. And so you get an emptying of that gallbladder. The bile coming out of the gallbladder that's coming out right near the stomach. And seems to be a little bit of like a reverse peristalsis, and it ends up in the stomach. Now, we have you drink water to begin with so that if you do end up with all that bile in your stomach, you're now not trying to purge straight bile because that's incredibly uncomfortable and very thick, right? So we want some sort of a substrate in the stomach to allow that bile to come up. Now, another thing that's happening is one of the peptides is actually kind of tickling a part of the brain that is considered called the chemoreceptor trigger zone. Now, this is something in the brain that's like when it senses that something is a little bit amiss, it's like, hey, you should probably get this out. And so it senses these changes happening in the body, and it's like, not really sure about this. Let's probably just try and get it out. So the purging is either just this intense nausea from having bile in the stomach, right? Or this tickling of the chemoreceptor trigger zone in the brain. And that's usually what brings on the purge. It's not a necessity, right? Because whatever is in that bile was going to come out anyway. It was going to come out the next time you went to the bathroom, right? The next time you had a fatty meal, the gallbladder would have contracted, started releasing that bile to bind up to the fat and start breaking it down. And then it would travel through your intestines and come out. So it's going to come out one way or the other. And so if it doesn't come out through your mouth in a purge, it will come out the next time you go to the bathroom. So that's kind of this misunderstanding of the purge. Now, in saying that, I don't want to discount the power of an energetic purge, right? And so, yes, Kambo is like this incredible, concoction of peptides and science and cool stuff. But there is this other more energetic aspect to it that I don't want to discount. But I always go back when I'm talking to somebody about this, or I have somebody in front of me, we're working with Kambo. Whether or not you have something to release from an energetic perspective is totally between you and the frog, right? If it is meant to come out, it will come out. And I fully trust the frog and the work that it's doing with you to allow for that if it is what's needed. So there's nothing I don't need you to drink a ton of water to create this purge. We can just allow it, right? We allow what is to come up. And if that means nothing, if that means you end up tearing up and crying, if that means you end up like shaking and shivering, or maybe that means you sit in incredible discomfort for the next
like me.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Lay
you
on
know
the
what I'm talking
floor.
about.
No.
Yeah, maybe that means you're just really uncomfortable for the next, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes. Then that may be what it is also. And there's beauty and power in all of that. Um, and in my perspective, there's nothing I need to do to get in the way of the work that the frog is doing energetically with you.
Wow. So good. I have to say, I've done combo with Sarah a few times, and she was the first person I've worked with. And, the other people I worked with were like trained and, had a background or medicine people. But Sarah, because I think your background as a nurse, working in the actual medical field at one point in your career, you were like timing it, like it was really nice to be held in like such a professional manner of like very methodical and like kind of in that science of like, okay, here's the proper amount of time to actually leave it on, get the full benefits. And it was really good. And yeah, it's always a fascinating experience. And I think there's just so much mystery around it for so many people, but I'm so glad that you've studied it and you're out here talking about it.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us like have heard little bits and pieces about the peptides, and I'm sure hopefully there's more studies being done. And but we all know like, wow, that felt good or that worked or, that healed XYZ. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm curious, do you have a lot of clients that come to you for energy and fatigue? Is combo something that comes up for all of them? Like, hey, this might be something you want to try, or are there certain people that shouldn't even do combo?
Certainly. There are certain conditions that will exclude somebody, right? If you've ever had a heart attack, if you've ever had a stroke, if you have the other big one is like Marfan's or Ehlers-Danlos, right? And the way I sort of view combo, I think that combo is very, very powerful. Um, but I think that we need to sort of look at the whole picture. So, for example, for somebody who has Lyme, right, or mold, these I think are really, really powerful. But I think we have to be so careful because, you know, one of the things that combo has are like these 9 different peptides that are all antimicrobial, and they're such powerful antimicrobials that we need to be really careful with them. So, if I'm going to work with somebody, I want to make sure first, especially if we suspect some sort of chronic infection, we want to kind of make sure that your detox pathways are working well, that your liver is well supported, and that you have the things that you need to be able to process the metabolites of breaking down that bacteria, right? So I see it as an important and really powerful tool, but I also see it as one that I put together in part of like a grander plan. And it's not always right for everybody. Right. I've certainly spoken to people who were in the middle of a fertility journey and they were working with a fertility doctor and they were on injections. And I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of things that are happening within with your hormones, right? And coming from your adrenal glands and also sort of prolactin. We know there's, a little bit of an increase in with like prolactin during this. And so like we need to like step back and allow a process to happen and let's come to combo afterwards because somebody's usually paying a lot of money for some of these treatments, right? And so allowing that to complete and then kind of working with it. So there's certainly times where and I always come from the perspective of let me find all the reasons I shouldn't do this, right? When there is risk involved with something, let me find all the reasons I shouldn't. And if I can't find a reason that I shouldn't, then let's move forward. But another thing I kind of want to bring up around like combo and a lot of the concerns that people have or stories that they may have heard is this idea of, kind of going in and they throw like 5 points on you, right? Or a ton of medicine on you or a ton of
10.
discretion on you, right? And it's also, if you're, depending on where you are, maybe we start, but we start really small. We build a relationship with the medicine. We see how your body responds. And I find that people will have incredible benefit from smaller amounts. So it's put it into the big picture. Is it right for you at all? Is it right for you right now? Is your body supported to be able to handle it? And then how are we going to work with it? And my general approach is gentle. Like one of the things I think that we have this mindset is that, especially when you've been sick for a long time, right? You're like, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to get this thing. I'm going to heal this body. And it's like, go at it. I'm going to, as my own mindset was, I'm going to beat this thing into submission. And that is so far from the approach that I think we need to be taking with our body. It's gentle. Kambo can be gentle, right? We can work gently with it. We can develop a new relationship with the body where it's like, how can we lovingly hold this thing so that it can heal versus going at it and trying to warrior our way through this thing with Kambo. Rather, let's build a relationship. And sometimes it is right to go in with a bigger dose, but let's build a relationship first. So you and the medicine, you and the secretion have an understanding, and we're not going to shock your system by putting it through this really intense experience.
So glad you say that. I know, because I've met people who are going in for their first time and they have like 10 dots all over them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, there's, it's like the Wild West in this kind of in the whole medicine world and the psychedelic space. There's a lot of, anything goes. People who are like bigger is better, and I'm glad you said that. Like if you're starting out, maybe, start out small. It's not the last time you have to do it, and just build a relationship, see how you respond. And, we will say there have been deaths from this medicine. Not I think we only know, I don't know what the statistic is. I wouldn't say it's like super up there in the high risk, but it's true. There have been people who died, which, there's people that die from crossing a street as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think that that's where, particularly working with somebody who has been well trained becomes really important. And unfortunately, a lot of the deaths are, caused by hyponatremia. And that usually is where they're using it within the confines of like an ayahuasca retreat where people are not taking in any salts. And then you add in the belief that you have to get this stuff out of you, right? This idea that the purge is a toxin release. And so then you have a ton of water being consumed in a short period of time. Plus, you already don't have very much sodium on board. And that creates hyponatremia. And that's how a lot of the deaths end up happening. So working with somebody who's well trained, I'm a massive fan of Tribal Detox. Their training is absolutely top notch, in my opinion.
And you've written one of them. No, it's funny because I the people I work with in Peru are like very purists. Like, what do you need that stuff for? Is kind of their reaction. Like, you don't need that. So sometimes when I hear of these retreats that have like 5 different medicines in 3 days, it's like, why? Like, that just seems like so much sometimes, and it's like, I don't know if our world, especially with the world that we're in today and the energies and just the pace that our life is going, I don't know if bigger is always better, It's like maybe the opposite effect. But let's get into the other arms of your work. Because you just mentioned like sometimes maybe the slower approach, really like knowing your body is able to heal and working with your body. Every body is different. Every time I go through some kind of health crisis, which seems to be every 4 years for the last last 16 years, I'm like, every 4 years I have this thing that's like, oh, wow, yeah, everybody's body is completely different. But, you mentioned one thing earlier that we were talking a little off camera. It's such a common experience for me to hear other people talk about having low energy, being tired, fatigue, like I'm so tired all the time. I've dealt with a lot of clients over the years too who've reported this. And, maybe I'm blessed where I rarely get that way. And sometimes I do. And when I do, it's like, wow, something's really off. It's probably my constitution, but why are so many people experiencing like kind of mysterious nonstop like loss of energy, fatigue, is there kind of a common thread or is it just everybody's different? And
Yeah, fatigue fatigue itself is a bit complex, right? Um, Something that we have to remember is that when we look at what fatigue is fatigue at its really foundation is mitochondrial dysfunction. And the mitochondria is the part, if you remember back from like high school science class, the mitochondria, right, is like the powerhouse of the cell. And so when we have fatigue, something is affecting the ability of that mitochondria to make energy, right? It makes energy for the cell operates properly, and then that's how we are alive, right? And feeling well and have energy to do things. We have tons of mitochondria in our brain. We have tons of mitochondria in our muscles. So when we start looking at, the root causes of fatigue, we always have to look at, well, what are all of the things that can affect mitochondrial function? And I always kind of I kind of always step back to all of the foundations, right? And I actually just held a free lecture on sleep and fatigue, right? Coming from the belief that like if we're not sleeping, we're not able to heal, right? So we've got to always, my approach is always to step back and let's look at the foundations first, right? Are you sleeping? And because if you're not sleeping, we can't really get very far elsewhere. So let's try and get that into place. Now, from that point, it's like, well, what are all the things that create issue in that mitochondria? So that can be, I mean, it can be literally everything. So that is toxin overload, right? Heavy metals, glyphosate, all of these sort of things. It can also be gut inflammation, inflammation in general. It can be metabolic issues, right? Because we got to be able to get the glucose into the cell to be able to make that energy, that ATP in the mitochondria. So if we, and that's one thing that's actually a huge issue, especially in the United States and really kind of globally, is insulin resistance, right? So we need to start sort of looking at the big picture and thinking of all the things that are going on. I mean, nutrient deficiency, right? Do we have the nutrients to be able to make the energy that we need? Whether that's iron, which is helping to not just create red blood cells and carry oxygen, but it's also involved in helping the thyroid to function. So we need to kind of step back and look at the picture as a whole and think about all the things that are contributing to mitochondrial dysfunction, right? Because if we just try and go and like, okay, well, what do I do to fix the mitochondria? Then it's like, well, if all this other stuff is still happening and you're not sleeping, then we're not really going to get anywhere. So let's step back and go to, and this is kind of what we talked about a little bit before, is like that root cause, right? The root cause is like, where is it coming from? And it's not just addressing it at the end point, is going all the way to the back and like, where is this coming from?
My God. It sounds like so much like there's so many factors there. It's like environmental toxins, our food system, the soil. I mean, like
Right.
everything. But wow, this is amazing, and you know so much about this realm, and like I know because I've worked with you, and I also coached you for a while. And there's so many people out there struggling with, even like these kind of mysterious effects. I don't even like to use this language, but like the long COVID or whatever we call it. These kind of like I mean, because it's like me, mysterious, thing for a few months, friends of mine, where it's like, I don't even know what's wrong, but something has flared up, around here. It's like someone who has Lyme, 15 years ago, like one little thing, and they're like, oh, I have a Lyme flare up. And it's like, no one even knows what causes it. It's like one little thing. But let's hear a little bit about the work you do with clients. Like, what is your, how do you approach these issues with clients? Because yeah, there's like a no one size fits all. Is there, yeah, like a general approach that you take?
Yeah, totally. One of the things that I think is really important is that like, so I do a really extensive intake, right? And which I'm sure you remember, there's like tons of forms to fill out, right? I want to know all about you. I want to know all about you since you were born. Because oftentimes, like we can sort of start to see in history, like and it's usually a stressful period. What I often find for people is there is a stressful period that predates or like precedes suddenly things starting to sort of change. And usually there will be for people like a moment they're like, yeah, man, I wasn't the same after that. Something happened. And man, I was really stressed out after this period, and something wasn't the same after that. And so then that's like, okay, let's kind of peel back to what else was happening there. So that's one way that I'll sort of start like viewing the picture, but it's also like, let's look at you as a whole system, right? What are the stressors in your life that we can sort of help to navigate? Where are the deficiencies that might be lying within your diet? What are things that might be actually causing inflammation for you that's feeding this issue? So we want to kind of look at it as from a very holistic perspective. And the other thing is I also really believe that like deep down there's a knowing inside of you, right? Like, and I know that we're going to get a little bit away from like my sciencey side for a moment, but I really do believe that like deep down, we know what we need, right? We are the supreme knowers of this body. And I see my role a little bit of like, um, let me help to interpret some of these symptoms or these signs. Your body's giving you signs that something's not right. And let's try and work through it together. It's collaborative. Your body's giving us these signs. Let me help you interpret and something will resonate for you, right? And you're like, yeah, man, that actually sounds like something I really want to try. That sounds like a big positive. Oh, yeah, that something about you. There's a gut feeling that, oh, that actually sounds possible. So part of what I'm doing is I want to help you interpret the signs because that's what they are. They're your body telling you, giving you information so that you can redirect, so that you can feel well. The other thing is I like kind of bringing back the power to you, right? We are used to in the Western system, and I know this because I was so stuck in it, right? This system of handing over power. You go to the doctor so the doctor can just tell you what's wrong with you. And you may have ideas of thoughts, and that might be dismissed, which is oftentimes what I hear is that people are in many cases like dismissed by their provider, in which case that's kind of what that's right that's them kind of telling you that you don't know your body, and like you are the one living in this thing. You've been living in this thing for 40 some odd years, right? And so that's part of it. It's like, how can I help facilitate like listening to the body while honoring like what you know of your body, and like helping to sort of like grow that, and grow that belief that you are the supreme knower of your body. And maybe I can educate, and maybe I can give some more insight into like what may be happening over here and more insight over here. And sort of together we come up with a plan that is that we then kind of step out because we can't do everything at once. That's the other thing. You go to some doctors and they send you home with like 20 supplements and we're going to do all this stuff right now. And it's like, actually, let's step back. Let's work a little bit on sleep and let's work a little bit on your gut. Those are usually the two places I start because those are things that most people have a lot of problem with. And so it's the way I work is more let me help you stage it. Let's parse it out. And let me also help you tune into what this thing is trying to tell you. And my goal is that you actually, after our work together, you actually feel really good and you feel like you understand your body a little bit better because you're starting to see the signs or you see how it's operating, how it responds to things, and that you can course correct as need be, right? Where I'm always here in the background if things go a little bit awry. And you're like, actually, I need a little support to course correct. Then I'm always here. But my goal is for you to not need me, like to handhold, but I am here in the beginning to handhold and help you start to like deeply connect with this thing and listen to it.
This is so good. I'm so glad that you're doing this from a very empowering perspective. Because yeah, I was like, oh yeah, I've been dismissed, like even just recently, and I don't go to many traditional doctors, but it's so interesting how it's like everybody thinks they know like their way, like, no, it must be this and it has to be that. And it's like, well, but I feel like intuitively it's this other thing. And it happens all the time to people. So, and it's really good because over the years, the more I've gone through, like mysterious health issues once in a while, the more I've really tuned in to that place of like, you know what? Like I know this pattern, because I've worked with people like you, and like you said, like looking at the patterns of what else maybe happened, what could have triggered it. I mean, it's so interesting, this holistic perspective of taking in much more than just like the body, because it's everything, right? It's like we have to pay attention to what was going on, the stress. And I really appreciate that you bring this all in and are empowering people to not need you. Because that's the other thing. It's like the world that we're in, there's and I think I had told you this because I've told it to almost every one of my health coach clients. I've had a lot of health coach clients or, people in that kind of general category, functional medicine. And I say, look, there's so many people out there, especially with access to the internet and social media and TikTok, that are saying like, here's the one way, here's my formula, here's the supplement that I'm selling or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And people are just so easily like, oh, I'll go try the new thing or I'll go try that. Or, like, oh, this influencer I follow says I should do this. And it's what happens is, I mean, because this has happened to me where it's like, oh my God, you hear of like 1,000 different things. And I think a lot of us experienced this during COVID too. It was like, here are all the things that help prevent it or cure it. And it was like, at one point, my herbalist, who we're both friends with, Sam, he's like, wow, like that's a little too much. Like I literally couldn't sleep because I was taking so many different supplements. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll take it down a few notches. So um, but is this something you're finding with a lot of people where it's like in today's day they don't even know what to do anymore because there's just so many. One day kale is bad for you, and the next day it's don't
Uh,
eat meat. It's like everything.
yeah, and that's one of the things I actually had somebody the other day was like, "Oh, did you hear the study on oatmeal? Oatmeal is really bad because of this reason." And I'm like,
Oh
"Let's
man.
step back from this. I'm not into like this food is really good and this food is really bad." I like to kind of move away from like the dichotomy of that, right? And rather, and especially around supplements, like just like you said, people will see things online and it's like, "Oh, this is good." And I've oftentimes had people come to me and they're taking so many different supplements, and it's like, okay, there are probably some ones that you should take, and let's figure out the ones that actually have an impact for what's going on for you, and then the ones that are you're just wasting your money on. Like for they're not addressing like your issue. And it's interesting that's people have mentioned like, oh my gosh, what about just doing like a gut program? Right. And I'm like, there's really everyone is really unique, and what's going on with their gut is really unique. And I can't just be like, just do these things and everything will be fine. Like it feels like just it doesn't feel right for me to do that. I'm like, no, I need to know what's going on for this person because we're so individual. We're so individual. And so when people throw out these, oh, this is the one thing or this is the one way, it's like there's too many individuals and we are such complex beings. Like I just, yeah, I don't love it. I don't love it. And I do definitely see people come with that, and they come with their slew of supplements because that's what the information, there's information overload, right? And part of that's again something is it's all a lot of education, right? It's like let's step back and for different supplements, I can tell you this is probably who this would be really good for. This is probably who wouldn't really benefit from it as much. And this is the situation to use it. And maybe this is the situation not to use it. So I really sort of like take it from that perspective of like there's not like a one thing. Now, I will say I think everybody should be on magnesium. So there are a couple things that I'm like, yes, magnesium. That is my top one. I think I've even personally taken magnesium since like 2009. And I
Yeah.
credit it for a lot of the benefits, things that have been really helpful for me. So yeah, there's certain things that yes, everybody needs to be sort of looking at, but majority of it is just not for everybody.
So funny. Maybe our whole world would be calmer if everybody took magnesium.
I love magnesium.
I honestly like I don't know how people sleep without it. I just have been taking it for so long right before bed that I don't know. I actually haven't tried not taking it in a long time.
Yeah. And
Um
once you sort of understand what it does for neurotransmitters, right? It actually is responsible for making GABA, the calming neurotransmitter. And on top of that, it also helps the GABA to bind to the receptor. So everything about being calm needs magnesium.
mm, wow. And see, I don't even know how that worked. I just know pretty much everybody I've ever worked with has suggested it too. And if sleeping like really, and I enjoy deeply sleeping because I really love dreaming. So, I could probably sleep fine without it, but it's one of those things where it's like, well, it's here, it's easy, it's comes recommended. It's and they say so much of our soil is depleted of these minerals and nutrients these days. And even though I'm eating like probably some generally, I would say it's some of the cleanest food that we can get direct from the farm, like direct meat from the guy that killed it, like really at the best of the sources. And, it's so much deeper than that. It's like our rain and our soil and,
Yeah.
who knows, like the amount of toxins and lack of nutrients that we're getting. But so I'm curious, when I first met you, you were already doing this kind of health wellness coaching, the peptide work, the combo, and then you went through my mastermind. And now, yay, I'm so excited because you're offering live workshops. You are
Yes.
doing discovery calls. You are accepting clients. You've been involved in a lot of things since I met you, veterans work, psychedelic space. You did the combo training. There's a lot that you put into, process during the group mastermind program. But I'm curious, what were you doing before you came to the program? And then tell us about what you're offering now and like what had shifted over that time frame.
Totally. You know, what I really, really appreciate with the program is that before I was just kind of like, I just like working with everybody, right? I just very spread out there, which I still do, but now I feel like I'm a little bit more focused, right? Um, I have whether or not you believe in astrology or not, I'm a Gemini and I'm just like all over the place. I love everything. I want to do everything. And so I found myself like I was really so scattered. And one of the things that has really shifted, especially like through your program, is to begin just focusing myself. And focusing myself with like a strategy of moving forward, right? And it's so awesome because it's like, okay, there's like put one foot in front of the other, instead of like trying to do all of it and all of it right now. And so now I think I'm actually able to help people more from this place of clarity, right? Because now I'm really clear through that year that we worked together. I was going through some pretty intense journey of my own around like fatigue. And it was actually during that time that I sort of really was able to sort of expand out of it. And suddenly it was perfectly timed, right? To be able to kind of come out of it, have this whole blueprint for what I needed to do, recordings. And even though I wasn't doing it in the exact timing, I now have this like wealth of information of like how to best direct what I am passionate about to be able to help people. And yeah, now I've started to with a lecture series, just a free lecture series, right? And all of it is around fatigue. And it's taking all of these nuggets, like I said before, that I've picked up along the way. And now I have in place like a process, right? I have a better understanding of all the avenues to get the information out there and then what to do with it afterwards, right? I got to become really, I had a program before that I was offering, but I wasn't relaying the information as well as I could. And I think that that was affecting kind of the balance of how everything was sort of working. And now I feel really clear, much more clear about what it is that I'm offering. And I've even been able to expand, right? I can see it now where I have a little bit more of an in-depth program that I offer where we work much more closely. And then for others, something that's a little bit more 2 visits a year, plus a lot of like other free offerings in terms of like a free Q&As every month and that sort of thing. So I've been able to sort of really get so clear on what it is I'm offering. And I think that that allows me to reach more people, but also do better at what I'm doing because I'm more focused and I'm attracting the people who are meant to speak to me.
So good. Yeah, and it's thank you so much for sharing. I love it because it's like you said, yeah, you were doing fine before and it's like, oh yeah, I want to help everybody and I have all these different things. And it's always very hard for people to believe this. And I always say, look, like when you're really attuned with like where the energy is at, like what's calling you the most and kind of hone in on that, like the focus, the clarity, which sometimes takes time and sometimes takes going through your own personal portal, which I have seen. By the way, it's awful to witness, and I've seen it so much for people where it's like, oh, you kind of have to go through that journey yourself in order to then help people with it. But I do believe it's a soul journey. It's like, oh, okay, now I'm being really tested at this whole new level of like your own health journey to then be able to better help people and get more of that clarity and focus. So I love it. And, thank you for going through that. It's funny because I knew you were going through that, but you still showed up, you were still there. You were still very engaged and did what you could and did the work. And now it's paying off, it's great. And I'm curious, there's always usually like a lot of other things that shifts through this process. What are your views on how health and wellness is also affected by living your life's purpose? Like, have you ever noticed this? Because I've noticed it in clients so much. I've actually had a lot of clients who've gone through really deep health journeys. And then, like people who've come to me, they're like, oh, I'm really misaligned in my work or my life, or I have a job I hate. And then they tend to have a lot of these like health issues. And I feel like, not to say it's like because of my program, but I witness them change and then their health seems to magically get better. Do you find that this is a thing, or is it just my own projection, what I've witnessed?
Man, I have to tell you, I 1,000,000% like agree with you, right? I think that, I mean, I could make all kinds of give you all kinds of explanation around the immune system and stress, right? So there is and always an interplay there. And I think when we're not in our purpose and we're like dreading going to work every day and there's like a heaviness to all of it, that there is something kind of weighing on the immune system
Mm,
there. Now, on the other side of that, I think that when we start making more space energetically by doing the thing that we're here to do, where we have joy, where our heart is activated in our doing it. And this is, without going into it too deeply, and I think you and I have kind of talked about this, but it's this idea that our our heart is the ultimate healer, right? We have the power to heal ourselves, I believe, kind of from anything utilizing the heart, right?
mm,
And so when we are in our heart in our work and we are in our heart in our purpose in what we're here to do, that opens up for so much healing throughout the entire body, but also in our relationships and all parts of our life. Things will just sort of start to fall into place, right? As we become much more aligned with that we're called to do. When we try and fight it, is when things just kind of go awry. But when we allow for it, everything else sort of falls into place. And there's like a settledness that comes into our body because the nervous system is an incredibly powerful driver of our overall health. So you can go into the medical aspect of the nervous system and nervous system imbalance. Um, but it's also energy,
yeah.
which is something I do talk to
Wow.
clients about. There is an energetic aspect to all this. We are physical beings, but we are also energetic beings. And we have to look at both sides of this. We can't just address one of them. Um, we're both.
Yeah. Amazing. And it's true. It's like, and the reality is too, is like if you're really struggling with energy or health issues or not hearing out of an ear, like I was going through, it's getting better every day. It's almost gone. But it's hard to focus and it's hard to be motivated, and I've seen this over and over. And so when people are, doing their healing work with their bodies, with their physiology, with their cells, like the mitochondria, like you mentioned, and it starts to align, you do start to witness more things aligning in life. It's like you can't really make it up. And if anything, it's very interesting. As a business coach, I've kind of been, for years I've said certain things to clients, like if clients are maybe living with certain habits that are not supportive, like whatever that might be, excessive X or Y, or drinking or not exercising or whatever it is, or not sleeping, I always say it's like we have to address the body first. And I'm a business coach. I'm like, but it's true. And I've seen it. I've seen clients, like, I mean, even the weirdest little things, like clients who are not grounded. And I'm like, well, might want to consider taking down your caffeine intake. And then they take it down. And then all of a sudden their business takes off. It's like, how do you explain that? And
Yeah.
there's such minor things. And I'll never forget, I had a coach say this to me a long time ago about, she just said alcohol is very low vibration. And I was like, ooh, maybe she's right. And I still drink here and there. I don't drink much, but and it is just so interesting. And I think with the world that we're in, with, I always say with Uranus and Taurus transit, which is we have another few months and then it goes in and then goes out again, that kind of thing. But I think more and more people are waking up and realizing, like, it is the pathway of the body. It's like all our emotions are stored in our body, our energetics, the cells, like you said. And this is why I'm so glad you have this work that you're doing, the offerings that you have, also the amount of knowledge you have. And I always said, I think it's great, by the way, that you have a background working with different psychedelic medicines as well, because that's something, for those of us that work with medicines, it's very hard to work with practitioners that don't know psychedelics, because they can't really take into account, like, if you're going on a, retreat or going to work with a particular medicine. And so I always say, like, I think it's great because then you can ask someone and be very transparent, like, oh, maybe you don't take this X number of days or weeks before that. So,
Totally, totally. And I have to say, like, even for myself as a nurse and as a nurse coach, psychedelics have been such a powerful guide for my own work that, like, it would be real. And I know there are organizations out there that are taking physicians to ayahuasca, um, which is really, really beautiful because it has been probably my most potent teacher. I always say, like, what I ceremony for me often is work related,
hmm.
and then afterwards she, like, upends my personal life. But the messaging I often get is a lot of work related, sort of stuff, and so I deeply understand the potency of it, and man, also the ability for that work to shift what is happening physically in the body is incredible. And I mean, I know we don't have really time for it all to go into it, but I've had my own incredible journey from a physical standpoint going to the medicine. And so there's so many, yeah, it's just such a potent teacher,
Have you
potent
had a
teacher for my body.
healing from the medicine? Because I remember you've mentioned
Huge.
certain things. Yeah.
Yeah, huge. If we have the time, I'll share just a
Yeah.
really brief.
Let's hear a little bit.
Yeah, totally. So I have one of the conditions that I have a diagnosis for, which I don't like own, right? It's not my diet. It's that I've been assigned by other people, is mast cell activation. And it was so funny. I had sat with ayahuasca and she showed me in this imagery that we could heal ourselves. And I remember thinking, like, I'm supposed to learn more about that, but whatever, that's not for right now. A few months later, I sat and did a pretty large mushroom experience. And it was deep and powerful and had a lot of interesting ties to, like, interesting, my mom, who also has some, histamine sort of issues. I wake up the next morning covered in hives, and it reactivated my mast cell, and it was so severe. Literally nothing was working. I was doing all of the things. I was talking to other practitioners, and I was like, okay, this is all the stuff I'm doing. What am I missing in this picture? And what I kind of kept coming to was like, oh, the medicine told me that we could heal ourselves, and this is where that I'm supposed to learn this. And I was like, I need to go sit with the medicine again. And so I was really at my wit's end. I was I was almost incapacitated. This was within the year before you and I started working together. I was almost incapacitated. I could barely function because I mean my throat would close up at night. So I go and I sit with ayahuasca, and ayahuasca in those 3 nights, sitting with our Peruvian teacher, took me through this journey where first she told me to just be quiet and stop trying to solve this problem with my head. The next night, she gave me she kind of brought me to my knees and gave me the message that I needed to reattune my body to the frequency of love. And then and then after that, I was still a little bit lost. And I was like, yeah, but how? Like, I hear you, but how? Like, and the final third ceremony is when she taught me this process of working with the energy of the heart and how we can utilize this and share it with the rest of our body to do that reattunement. I don't know how that's going to play itself out in my work as I move forward because this is such a power. Let me say this. The next day, my hives were completely gone. I went from debilitated to completely gone. And yes, I've had a couple of other things. A year later, they flared up again from a gluten exposure. I went back to the medicine wouldn't even talk about it. She wouldn't address it. She wouldn't go there with me. And then I went to the wedding of 2 dear friends of mine, and my heart was just bursting open watching them getting married, and my hives went away again. And it was, I could hear a grandmother coming in and saying, "I told you the message. I told you how to do this." And so, yeah, I think my work will eventually evolve, and I do sort of keep this lesson as part of my perspective as I'm working with somebody, right? But not everybody's ready for that. Not everybody is there. And so it's like, let's work with the physical and let's open up this concept that there is way more to this than what you've probably been told. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now is I've had this powerful experience that I cannot explain and modern medicine cannot explain. The way it just stops. And I'm talking about my throat is closing at night. And I'm covered in hives to nothing. And yeah, there's power in this experience. And as I've been told by a couple different psychics, like my body's my university and I'm to learn through this thing and then share. And so I'm looking forward to how my work will evolve to more deeply work with this lesson. But for now, it's deeply part of the perspective that I keep. So physical, yes, but also energetic.
So good. Yes, I can't wait to see that come in. I mean, because it is so important, and it's interesting how much it does show up, and it's funny because even I think so many ancient spiritual texts, right, and like spiritual practices, they always bring in the body. It's funny. I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, which you wouldn't even think would mention the body, and there's a whole section where it talks about this. It talks about it from a different approach, but with like slightly different language. But it is talked about even in that text, which who knew? I didn't know that until I started really diving in. I was like, oh, that's interesting. They address health, wellness, disease, or I forgot the language they use, but when you're not well and
Yeah.
what's really going on. So, well, Sara, I am so proud of you. I am just like, even considering your setbacks with your health and jumping in and trusting being in the mastermind program, it was really amazing to watch, like the amount that you were doing. You were like flying to work with a veterans group and getting involved in, decriminalization and legalization of psychedelics and plant medicines, going to networking events, speaking, putting on events, getting clients, working with clients, being flown around the country to do Kambo, which is amazing. I mean, there's just so much. So I'm really proud of you. And thank you for trusting in the journey and working with me.
Thank you so, so much. I cannot explain all those things you just talked about. And what's funny is like what your course helped me to do is clear out so much of that and focus so that I can actually do the work I'm supposed to, that I'm here to do. And so I'm eternally grateful for the work that we've done together.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll have to have you come on again and go into like the whole next level of Kambo because I find it so fascinating. So thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. So good to have you here.
Doing it.
Oh, and we'll just mention, we have Sara's links right here in the show notes. She does offer a free discovery call. You do have the lecture series coming up. So please, everybody, check that out. And, feel free to reach out to Sara. I think we should also put in your tribal detox advanced practitioner training for anybody who is a Kambo practitioner. It's probably a very good idea to get advanced training as well. So
I would agree. Yeah, and I'll also we'll also include tribal detox in general for anybody who's interested in. If I'm not in your area and you're looking for a trained practitioner, they have a great practitioner registry. So that's another resource if it's something that you're interested in.
Great. Aw, thank you so much for being here, Sara. So good to have you.
Thank you so much, Beth.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're feeling inspired, I'd appreciate it if you showed your love with a review. And check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of this podcast. You can also head to bethaweinstein.com to learn more about me and grab my free business growth trainings. Remember, you carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times.